Yeah, it has, and if I'm gonna be honest, I feel really bad about that. Really? 'Cause, dude, I don't want to subject him to this shit. You think they're gonna take it well? Yeah, I'm gonna need a minute. Ah, yes, let me help you with that. Alrighty, now that he is gone, I have to do something that, well, I have been holding off for a while. I gotta have a real talk with you guys. Real talk! So, I have not been the greatest person in the world when it comes to this show. I've been at a standstill with production, so much so that basically I've put the show on hiatus for a while now. And honestly, I feel terrible about it because this show, this dumb show about video games, is my pride and joy. It's my baby. So, in order to rectify that, there's one thing I can really do here. I think I need a new set of wheels. A new personality, so to speak. A new me. So, I didn't want to do this, but I have to. Here we go. All should be good. Shouldn't hurt, should it? I've done it once before. To all those I have worked with in my time, friends, companions, members of that guy with the glasses, Nerdvice, YouTubers alike, I salute you, and I apologize. Position heal thyself. That little opening of mine was just my way of telling you I got a super awesome haircut. Ain't it spiffy? I mean, look, it got the little side shaved and whatnot. It's kind of cool. Anyway, so in order to rectify my lack of productivity on the show and basically being a poopy producer, I figure we need to go back to the start. Months ago, at some point in the summer, I wrote this script that essentially psyched me out and put me on this path of incompletion. So I figure if I want to get back on the bandwagon, that's probably the best place to start. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be taking a look at a game that basically defines the term cult classic. And I don't think I need to go any further than that. This is Earthbound. Earthbound sold 140,000 copies in North America and about twice that number in Japan. Wow, that is actually not good at all, but yet again, there's a reason why some things become cult classic hits. The Big Lebowski, System Shock, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, anything that Ralph Bakshi has ever made in the history of forever. So, all these films and games that basically earned the title of cult classic, they all did something to basically change the way we look at media as a whole. Now, the question is, what did Earthbound do to get that title? Well, some say that the game is full of endearing characters, ridiculous jokes, and bizarre situations. The game has been revered for its humorous depictions of American culture and parody of the role-playing video game genre as a whole. I mean, let's look at it this way. Back then, you really only had two kinds of RPGs. You had Chrono Trigger, and you had Final Fantasy. This was something new. This was something unconventional. This was something that no retro geek has ever seen before. Now, the next question I imagine you guys are asking, what were the reviews like? Well, every one of them was overall positive. According to Gamasutra, they referred to it as a warped, confused tribute to American culture designed by people who have only experienced the country through books and movies. In the January 2010 edition of Nintendo Owner, they called Earthbound the ultimate cult hit, and of course in 2005 Reader's Choice poll of the top 99 best games of all time, Earthbound was voted 46th on the list. A year later, they conducted a similar poll, and Earthbound was moved up to 33rd on the list. Other than that, here's an interesting fact you didn't know. Trey Parker, yes, that Trey Parker, co-creator of South Park, The Book of Mormon, and also Team America World Police, has officially said that Earthbound was one of the main inspirations for South Park, The Stick of Truth. Specifically how the mundane American setting and child heroes fit well with the South Park property. And yet again, I am playing this for the first time. You know, you would think that this would be on my radar, like, immediately, because I'm one of those people who loves cult classic things. One of the first underground video games I really got into was Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem. I love movies like Clerks, The Raid, and even The Big Lebowski. Hell, one of my favorite movies of all time is Oldboy, and that is considered a cult classic by any standard of the imagination. So, needless to say, I should have gotten the memo. Anyway, let's dive into the madness that is Earthbound. Taking place in a 1990s Eagle Land, our story begins with a young boy named Ness. Ness is awakened by a meteorite that has crash-landed near his home. Investigating the crash site with his annoying neighbor Pokey, Ness encounters with an alien creature named Buzz, who informs Ness that he is from the future where Gygus dominates the universe. Buzz instructs Ness to embark on a journey to defeat Gygus in the present due to the fact that he is too powerful in the future. Ness then proceeds to seek out 8 sanctuaries in order to unite his own powers with the Earth's, and to gain the strength required to confront Gygus and save the planet. However, all goes south when Buzz is later killed by Pokey's mother. Sweet Jesus, is that Pokey's mom? I'm really hoping at this point that he takes after his dad. However, all is not lost to Ness. Buzz gives him something known as the Soundstone, an item that is vital to the completion of his quest. With the Soundstone, he then continues on a quest to stop Gygus, discover new lands, and of course save the world. Now I gotta say, for a first-time playthrough of Earthbound, it is a weird game. My first thoughts when I dove in were, oh, wait a minute. A boy sets out on his own in a big adult world for a vaguely aimless adventure. Haven't seen that shit before. However, what really makes this game shine is the absurdist humor. Like, not even in the main plot, just some of the side dialogue and situations you're put in alone are hilarious. My personal favorite includes Buzz's death speech. Yes, I know I sound like a sick fuck for saying that my favorite moment is the death of a beloved character, but hang on, you negative bastards, hang on, I'll explain. In Buzz's final dying breath, he manages to get, a good monologue in before his inevitable demise. It's so over the top, so filled to the brim with cheese that you just can't hate it. Unless, of course, you lived your life as a game critic in the 90s. Then you would have probably thought it was dumb. I love how the game manages to make that sudden shift in tone from lighthearted children's adventure to dark apocalyptic story. The dichotomy and the juxtaposition that Earthbound conveys is pretty amazing. For example, while most enemies are a mix of silly and cutesy, like fighting animals or insects or even sentient piles of vomit, you come across enemies that cause the game to take a dark turn. Ness eventually activates all of his sanctuary locations and discovers a land called Magicant, within his own subconscious, of course. And of course, while in Magicant, he confronts his nightmares in the form of an evil Mani statue, which represents all of the evil, fears, doubts, negative attitudes that exist within him. That is deep for many reasons. 1, it's a boss fight that delves literally into the inner psychology of the main character. 2, the representation of his nightmare is very ambiguous. No one really knows why Ness's nightmare takes the form of an evil Mani statue. Also, Earthbound has this sort of slow-building tension that grows as the game progresses. It knows when to properly use foreshadowing. For example, throughout the game you hear bits and pieces about Gygus and whatnot, and even though they're very subtle, it's like planting seeds because as time progresses, Gygus becomes this end-all, be-all imminent threat. It's just great storytelling. The pacing is so good that it manages to just sucker you in from the first portion. The best comparison I can give to this game really is, say, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, of course, I sense a little hostility and apprehension as I make my case, but hold on, I will explain. Throughout the first book, you hear so much about Voldemort, or He Who Shall Not Be Named. How what he did was so unforgivable that it gives us this notion that he is pure evil. And by the end of the book, we're terrified to see him. Of course, though, Harry Potter fans, feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments below. Honestly, I can't find much that I dislike about the story. When you get right down to it, I would have nitpicked and said that the game was very weird in regards to its amalgamation in cultures. Like, almost as if it's a Japanese man's interpretation of what America's backbone is. Sure, Beach Boys and Blues Brothers, bring it the hell on. By the time the 90s were around, shit we were listening to were Boyz II Men and Seal. Where's their video game influence? But seriously, this is a game that tells you to suspend your disbelief. After all, you're fighting monsters like sentient puke piles, starmen, and tons of other oddities that lie within the game. Overall though, I'm really having a fun time with the story. It's a fun adventure of childhood and being a kid with the dark twists and turns that come with the game. Actually, now that I think about it, you could look at this game as, say, an adult's reflection on childhood. Like something that J.D. Salinger or Maurice Sendak would have written about in their prime. But regardless, it's a great story. This roller coaster between serious and irreverent actually manages to carry over into the gameplay. While cutesy sprites and charming music do set the stage and introduce you to the world, Earthbound makes no apologies for being a traditional JRPG. And in that, I mean it's pretty fucking difficult. At the beginning, that is. Don't believe me? Well, look at it this way. When you are alone in the beginning, you will realize that you tend to be quite underpowered and under-equipped. The best you will get is when you get the baseball cap and the T-bat. However, as the game progresses and you gather your friends, the party grows stronger and the struggle is less difficult. But it's never easy. It will never be easy. Not since... Frank. Now, believe it or not, Earthbound is one of those games that brought a lot to the JRPG table. Earthbound introduces innovations that even today feel smart and unique. The party's health, for example, is represented by scrolling number wheels. Rather than just hit points instantly depleting down to 0 with each enemy attack, the character's wheel slowly spins down until all the lost hit points have been deducted. So, if a character is dealt a fatal blow, there's actually a small window to heal him before he dies. And let me tell you, watching that wheel spin towards 0 while frantically trying to cast a healing spell is nerve-wracking. As a departure from the JRPG tradition, there are no random battles. Enemies are always visible on the map, so you won't have to worry about triggering battles at a bad time. Better yet, if the group vastly overpowers an enemy, it'll run away in fear. If you catch it, you win. Now seriously, the game literally gives you the win if you are that OP. And trust me, the first time you do this, it will be fucking surprising because you have gone through hell and back to get to a point, and you run into one of these enemies on the field, and the game just goes, oh wait, you win. It makes revisiting earlier areas an absolute cakewalk. I mean, imagine if Skyrim had this sort of element to the game. The game is chock full of references as well in order to make the game feel as Americana as possible. A number of influences in the soundtrack make it: the Beatles, the Blues Brothers, the Who, David Bowie, the list goes on. That along with the 1990s setting makes this literally the most Americana game ever. Being a kid, you are prone to use yo-yos and baseball bats in combat, and your armor of course consists of baseball caps, bracelets, and ribbons, and other things of that nature. Which is a very good touch in regards to the notion that in this RPG, you are a kid after all. By far, one of my favorite/not favorite things about Earthbound, the auto-fight command. Oh man, this fucking mechanic wore on my psyche like no other. Essentially, it speaks for itself. You click it, and you watch the battle ensue. What do I like about it? It's convenient if you have to go do something really quick and still want to play some of the game rather than pause it. It was rather intelligent for its time, almost like when TiVo recorded shows for you, before of course it recommended awful shit to you. The issue I have with it is the fact that you are playing Russian roulette with Ness and his friends. It's like you're a war general watching half of your platoon get mowed down by the opposing force, and there is nothing you can do until the command ends. And even then the outcome could be terrifying. Now before we touch on the presentation, there is one thing that has been the elephant in the room. I know I've briefly touched on it, but the enemies are by far the thing to me that stands out in this fucking game. Seriously, you can fight anything from gang members to robots to pieces of art by Salvador Dali to demons and aliens. Jesus Christ. It's almost as if the developers just threw things at a whiteboard just to see what would work. Game of the Year status up in this bitch. Earthbound is a different kind of monster in regards to the look and feel of the game. Yes, I will gladly say that it reminds me of 2D indie games that were probably inspired by games like Earthbound, but then again, some of the sprites for the characters really throw me off. For example, Pokey's mom. I don't know why, but oh wait, no, I know why. Maybe it's because her face is all mouth. No, seriously, all mouth. It's the creepiest sprite I've ever seen in a video game so far. And are we sure she's not a secret boss or anything like that? Because Honestly, that's fucking scary. And yes, I have seen the final boss, and no, Pokey's mom is scarier. However, on the other side of the coin, I really love how lively the game is. The moment you set foot in Onett, it really feels like you're spending time in the city. This is gonna sound weird, but the best example is like when a car passes by while you're walking, or when you walk into a burger shop and see people. Just people doing their own thing. Gotta love the little things that make the big picture shine a lot brighter. Everything is so vibrant and really makes the atmosphere so much better. Also, the variety and locations are fantastic. From the village of Saturn Valley to the haunting cave of the past, every location is different as they all have their own separate vibe, making the game more and more lifelike. That is what makes the world stand out in this game. The music of Earthbound is pretty interesting and offbeat. Mentioned it earlier, but the list of influence on the soundtrack is massive. What I do love though is the fact that the game is so diverse in its soundtrack. While it does use a lot of influences to fully thicken the game in Americana culture, it does manage to throw a couple of different cultures into the mix as well. Middle Eastern, South American, it's just as fantastic to hear. The one thing I gotta say though, some of the tracks, kinda disappointing. Hang on, whoa, let me explain before you go crazy with that. Now, of course, every soundtrack, hell, every album has its hits and misses. Some of the earlier tracks are kind of basic and sound a little bit like early NES chiptune tracks, like not much was put into them. It's only when you get further into the game, it's then that the soundtrack really takes a turn. I gotta say that my favorite music of the game has to be the Sanctuary boss battles. It meshes so well with the psychedelic battle sequences, the abrupt change in tempo, the drone of the background music, all of it works just so well together that I could listen to it for hours. See? I don't hate the soundtrack, I just have a couple of qualms with it. Now you can put the gun down. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, that's it, you're fucking dead. You're fucking— And that's the Earthbound review, and now I finally understand why it's a cult classic. Now at first I have to admit I was a little hesitant about looking at this game. To me at least, Earthbound is a different kind of monster. My initial thoughts from the get-go was that this was a weird game about some kid's daily life, and for the most part it is. And then you dive down the rabbit hole and see that there is so much to do, so much to explore that it's mind-blowing. The game has this merger of two cultures which seems like it's honestly one culture's depiction of another. But that's okay. I enjoy it regardless and can appreciate it for what it is. The story is very well done. The gameplay, while being just an SNES JRPG, managed to influence dozens upon dozens of other games. It looks great for a game made in the 90s and really manages to pull you in with the unique battle screens and variety in music tracks. And the support that this game has generated over the years, oh my god, it's refreshing and amazing to see such a fandom grow over a game that is 20 years old now. So that's the end of this episode of Last on the Bandwagon, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and honestly, it's good to be back. You know, I should probably check the list. I haven't done that in a while. Oh, you guys probably don't know what I'm talking about. I have a list on my iPad here. Basically, it just kind of entails all the stuff I've wanted to review, but I can't. So, you know what? I might as well take a look and see what I've gotten so far. Oh, God!